podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast support group for those impacted by the last 10 minutes of recent games as the Blue and Blacks create drama at the end of another Welsh derby. We'll be looking back at what went right and what went wrong against the Ospreys, as well as what it means for the rest of the season. Plus, the Rags march on, and there's finally some actual ownership news to discuss. Joining me on the pod this week, we've got Steve Coombs. Steve, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks, Dan.
Good stuff. Got Andrew Ford. Footy, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate.
And Simon Jones. Simon, how are you?
All good, thanks, mate.
Good stuff. Right, we shall start on Friday night then with the on-field action from the last Welsh derby of the season for Cardiff. A 24-21 win over the Ospreys, an ill-disciplined game. So Liam Belcher yellow-carded early before Callum Sheedy gave us the lead off the tee. Then Daniel Casende was red-carded for the Ospreys before Rory Thornton scored as Owen Watkin was yellow-carded. Kieran Williams grabbed a fortuitous score, I think you would call it, just before the break. But when Dan Edwards was then yellow-carded, Cardiff struck through Belcher and Dan Thomas. Jack Walsh and Edwards himself scored in the last 10 minutes, either side of a final yellow card of the evening for Josh McNally. But the Blue and Blacks managed to hold on for an important victory in the race for the top 8 of the URC. A couple of three-word thoughts. Ben said playoffs in sight. Lloyd said the boys worked hard. Gareth exclaimed, "Oh, wonderful line out." Rob described it as an almost great performance. Tim said, "We nearly thrown away." Geeks are cool. Went with much too close. Rob's heart can't cope. Jeff was quite positive. He said, "Knew we would." I think Jeff might have been the only person who felt that towards the end of that game. And then John, Mark and Gareth went with the weekly never in doubt. Coming to you first, Steve. What were your general thoughts on another exciting Welsh derby involving Cardiff?
I mean, the main feeling is just really proud of the team, because if you look at the two 23 selected, if we needed excuses, there's a whole bunch of them to choose from because of the number of players missing. No specialist 13, 2 hookers on the bench, no back row cover on the bench. But they I think we were the better team, and Mark Jones admitted that himself. We were that much quicker in thought and deed, and I think we did deserve the game. And that is full credit to the players and to the character of the players.
Bordy, your general thoughts?
Yeah, delighted to get the win. I think just in general, it was brilliant atmosphere there, kind of sellout, great weather, just a kind of great occasion. And I did fear that we were going to do a Scarlets, kind of what happened the week before, just in reverse. But yeah, delighted to get the win. And there's a couple of points after the game, tasted all that better for getting that win at the end.
Good stuff. Simon, what was your view on the 80 minutes?
Yeah, as Fordy said, it was great atmosphere. It's great to have the sun out and the crowd buzzing away. It was probably the most comfortably uncomfortable win that I've seen. Cardiff is nothing if not entertaining, because the Ospreys were not in that game until 10 minutes before time. I thought even when we were down a man, when Belcher was yellow carded, we seemed to control it relatively comfortably. And I thought, I'm just a bit annoyed that they got a losing bonus point, which I'm sure they feel the same about the Brewery Field before, on New Year's Day. But I didn't feel they could lay a glove on us, really. So, yeah, a bit frustrated that we didn't. Our dominance wasn't matched on the scoreline, but at the end of the day, at this point of the season, you just take the win. 9 points from those 2 games is a good return. When you're playing teams that are lower down in the league, you've just got to take your points. They're not necessarily challenging for the playoffs, but they would have wanted to derail us. And I think everything we spoke about last week, coming out with intent, controlled kind of passion and aggression and in defence. I think they did exactly what we wanted of us. It was just a shame that it kind of tailed off in that last 10 minutes. And I think we were all kind of like, oh no, this can't happen, can it? But even then, brave bit of decision making to kick to the corner rather than take those 3 points to go. We're gonna, turn the screw a little bit more, and came out on the right side of it. So yeah, 4 points onto Glasgow.
I feel like I actually owe everyone a slight apology because I wasn't able to see the game live, and I sort of watched the first 60 minutes via Twitter and WhatsApp with you guys kindly like filling me on with what was happening. And I did manage to find a television for the last 20 minutes and switched it on at 24/7. Oh, this is nice and comfortable, isn't it? And basically, as soon as I turned the telly on, it went completely pear-shaped. So if it had gone completely the wrong way, I would have felt somewhat responsible.
I mean, that's brave to own up when we've still held on.
I gotta hold my hands up. Yeah.
Would you have owned up if we hadn't held on?
I'm a very honest man.
No, I thought we were much better in this derby than we've been in any other derby from like from the first half as a whole, getting it right sort of emotionally. But I do think there is something in that stat about this developing where we sort of lose to the Ospreys every New Year's Day and then beat them more often than not in the spring now in recent years, which a lot of people say we shouldn't cut a team because then we'd lose the derby. I'm all in favour of losing the New Year's Day derby because we'll obviously never ever win that whenever, and we'll just keep ones in the nicer weather when we can actually play someone in rugby and put teams under pressure. But I think that was the most pleasing thing. I don't think like Cardiff were in control. I agree, Simon. I don't even think we were actually though like playing even particularly well. It wasn't like an all guns firing performance. We were doing what we needed to do, I think, to beat the Ospreys team. But I've certainly seen us play better than that for spells this season. But ultimately, you only beat what's in front of you, and particularly in a Welsh derby, I don't think you gripe too much if you're at a sort of 7 or 8 out of 10 rather than a 10 out of 10 when you're beating another team. Steve, I mean, how did we come so close to losing it in that last 10 minutes? Like, what did we not do well?
I mean, other than the fact that I started, I turned the telly on. I think a big thing was the bench. I think where we really saw the difference between the fitness and the players available to the two sides. You really saw it with the bench. They were able to bring on Harry Deeves, Ross Moriarty in that last 20 minutes, and bringing on like those sorts of like those types of forward makes a big difference. Towards the end of the game, Evan Lloyd's a good player, but he's not a specialist back rower. So I think they benefited from that extra impetus coming off the bench. And we were, particularly when you add, things like McNally's yellow card, we ended up looking quite stretched. And, possibly we did panic a little bit. Possibly we panicked trying to go with the decision making, trying to go for the bonus point at the end. But no, I think it's large. Similarly to 2 years ago when we really did have a very stretched squad throughout the whole season, where you really see the squad being stretched is when the bench comes into it.
I think Steve, that it's that momentum shift that was partly McNally's yellow card, but also the Jack Welsh try that just came from nowhere. Really, we if you kind of look at the stats, most of the Ospreys' possession was between either side of the halfway line. They weren't having a lot of 22 entries, and then that try just came literally out of nowhere. It was a great angle, a great run.
Forward pass.
Yeah, I did. I did. You hear me shout forward pass? The stag do from Northampton in front of me on the South Terrace didn't agree, but it just felt like this big momentum shift. And as you said earlier, Steve, when you're talking about praising the character of those players, to stand up in that last 10 minutes and stop that momentum shift when it just felt like everything was going their way. They deserve credit for it. They deserve credit for it because they could easily have crumbled, as the Scarlets did in the face of that.
Fordy, you mentioned the Scarlets game as well earlier. Obviously, there was quite a lot of parallels with it being 24/7 at the time that we were comfortably leading as well. I wonder, did we fail to learn any lessons from what the Scarlets did the week before? And particularly thinking about, was it the right decision on that 60-minute mark to go for the corner then? Did we go for the corner or tap? I can't remember. We didn't take the points anyway on that penalty, pretty much right in front of the sticks. Easy in hindsight, I guess. But Is it a case that we chase the bonus point rather than just making sure the game was wrapped up first?
I think looking, I watched the game back today, and I feel like looking back at the kind of the early 60th minute, I think a try did seem inevitable at some point. Like the amount of indiscipline from the Ospreys as well. I'm kind of surprised they didn't get another card at some point. And I think it was the wise decision to kind of try and push that bonus point, especially where we were in that game. But yeah, it seems that that last 10 minutes was quite shaky, and I'd like to think we did fare better than the Scarlets did. You know, I don't think McNally's yellow cards was quite as silly as Tame Plumtree's or Blair Murray's. And I still think that we were offering something towards the end, you know, like with a couple of minutes to go, I think it was the right decision to go for the corner where we did, to not necessarily just go for that bonus point try, but just obviously we could see the penalty anyway. But if we'd gone for the post and then conceded a penalty immediately from kickoff, we'd be absolutely kicking ourselves just 5 points ahead, and they basically would be camped on our line. So I think we were. It was a bit shaky, but I think we were still wise, and it'd be interesting comparing. Like against the Scarlets, I had full confidence that we were gonna win it at that end. It was just how fluid it was, that it seemed that we knew exactly what we were doing against the Scarlets in that last 10 minutes, exactly what everyone's role was, what their responsibility was, that the tries just seemed like they were coming. Whereas I don't imagine the Ospreys fans would have had that same kind of confidence, especially taking into account, was it New Year's Day 2025 where we drew to them, and I think they completely bottled any chance to win. I don't think they'd have had the full confidence there at the end to go for it. But yeah, I think definitely need to get a bit of advice and training of what to do in those last 10 minutes of games to close out properly, I think.
I thought we were a bit unlucky as well, just a few refereeing decisions, but the turnover that they get right at the end, I think there's a questionable amount of arms in the tackle from Harry Deeves on Azarati that he gets the turned over from. But yeah, just making them go a long distance. I don't think I don't have any problem with that call right at the end. Like even when we lose the ball, they still have to go the length of the field, and obviously playing uphill away from the clubhouse as well. So always tough that one. Simon, the we didn't get the try bonus point in the end. Is that sort of a little bit of disappointment? Because I like Fordy said, I didn't think the Ospreys, they didn't offer a huge amount on the night. You know, there's that really nice line that Cam Jones runs, whether pass or not is flat, aggressively flat, I guess the referee would say. But it is a nice line. Other than that, I thought they were quite blunt in attack. There wasn't a lot of variation to what they were presenting to us. We had quite a few 22 entries where we didn't score from. Might look back and think, oh, if we just got that extra point there, that could have helped us at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I left feeling that we'd left a point out there. You know, we had, as Fordy said, we had periods where it felt like we were going to score, and there was for large periods it felt like the Ospreys just didn't know how to get back into the game because they weren't physically running over us, and that's historically what they've done, is they've won the arm wrestle. We've got tired, you know, people have missed tackles or not kind of defended rucks properly, and they've run away with it. I don't think they've beaten us in quite some time by being kind of particularly fancy or, you know, playing particularly expansive. I think a big part of it, they didn't own the air on the night either, which I think is I think you highlighted it down on socials around how good Bowen was under the high ball as well. But that started to wobble a little bit in that last 10 minutes. I think we started to lose a bit of ball in the air as well. Same as what we talked about the Scarlets game as well. Once we started being competitive in terms of regathering kicks, then we looked a lot better. But yeah, I think for the level of dominance that we had, as Fordy said, it felt inevitable we'd get another try. I don't think come the end of the season when we sitting there going, oh, if only we got that 1 point against the Ospreys, we'll sit here going, oh, if only we'd beaten the Scarlets in December, that's the one. You know, I don't think dropping that point. I'd have wanted us to get a bonus point because I think if we got a bonus point, the Ospreys weren't scoring another 2 tries against us, I think we probably would have got on and got another. And we had, a number of, there was one in the first half that was really unlucky where it kind of bounced over Beetham's head on the wing, and he had a relatively straight run to the line. But I think you can't underestimate, it was physical and hard out there as well. Those tries we scored were kind of hard yards, just pounding away at the line. So for me, I'll take a win over the Ospreys, and Y11 be gone from our thoughts until next year. We've got bigger things on the horizon, bigger teams on the horizon. So let's focus on that. But yeah, I'd like to have got 5 points out of it. I think we could have got 5 points out of it, but we've just lost our way a little bit in some of the close contact, which I think has got to be looked at, because a couple of times this season, Treviso, Benetton, away in the cup, where we were on the line and we knock on, even though we've scored probably 2 or 3 tries in that one sequence away at Benetton. But there is something just about cool heads in those moments to ensure we get over the line. But, as I said on the chat, the Ospreys, they had a scrum, a referee and some kicking, and that was pretty much it. That was the refereeing of the scrum.
I was wondering if we were going to mention this.
Was odd, because at one point, and I haven't watched the game back, but the Ospreys front row stood up and were being driven backwards, and they got a penalty. And I was just kind of like, and the referee was clearly saying, use it. And then they got, I don't really know. Obviously, there was something going on that he was not happy with how we were scrummaging. But there are a couple of scrum penalties that absolutely, no problem with. But it just felt like a picture had been painted and he made up his mind. I don't think we had a scrum penalty till like the 60th minute or something. It just left me wondering what we were going to have to do to get a scrum penalty, because they didn't look comfortable at times. It didn't look as heavy to one side as it was to the others. But we won, so who cares? Let's move on.
I would have included the scrum refereeing if we had lost. It would have been an official agenda item. But it was some slightly strange decisions for the first sort of 70 minutes in particular. I think Azarati did have a bit of genuine issue getting to grips with. I think he was maybe just surprised by how big Cam Jones was. I don't know. That was a late change as well, so maybe he hadn't prepped too much to scrummage against him either. But his setup wasn't quite right. When he did get into the scrum, he folded him up quite comfortably on the one scrum penalty we did get. But something for Azza to look at. A bit more positive, Steve. Whilst we didn't maybe score as much as we should have, I thought getting to the red zone, we looked pretty good. There was a lot of variation in our attack. We even, set up a midfield maul at one point, which I don't know if Cardiff have ever done that in the professional league. Certainly, definitely not against the Ospreys. But when Cornel van Zyl had his contract signed, I think there was a lot of comments about he can get his own coaching staff in and particularly have a look at the attack coaching. Is Johnny Goodridge sort of growing on us at all as attack coach, or is it still the case that maybe skills coach is where his strength is and he needs somebody in with him?
You probably have to be closer to the setup to answer that properly. You do look at the attack at times this season and it has looked shaky, and you compare it to how slick it was looking right at the start of the season, and there has been, you just feel like there's been a bit of a downgrade. Does that mean that Johnny Goodridge hasn't adapted and got better over the course of the year? I think he has, and I think our attack has adapted. It's possibly still too early to say whether he should take it over full time. I wouldn't be opposed to it. But that would still leave the question open of who comes in alongside him, because it's still only there's still only him as the only full-time guy coaching the backs, which. Unless you count Lee Halfpenny, but then he's just the goal-kicking coach. So I don't know whether we look at Dan Fish coming in full-time. I think he's been doing it part-time. Or we look to bring in some outside ideas. But then you see the other question is, if you do look outside, do you say to someone, okay, here is basically how we're set up. This is the way Matt Sherratt did it, and we want you to continue doing that. Or do you give them a blank sheet of paper? And right now, I'm thinking it probably is better to go for continuity. Um, but yeah, it's a trick. And on the recruitment side, what we do with the attack coach probably is the biggest question that there is for Van Zyl.
40, we held a funeral basically for the line out last week after it capitulated against the Scarlets. But this week it was 12 from 13 with 3 steals as well. Rory Thornton is obviously the big change there, coming in to start in the second row. The question I asked was he the second coming of Luke Charteris on the agenda? But like, I guess, is there an argument to say now that him and McNally is maybe the right balance for us at this point in the second row, whereas previously it's sort of been McNally not all season? Or is it just one of those games where, the weather was quite nice and we were able to just get on top in the set piece and it didn't matter too much about who was there other than being Thornton as a specialist line-out option?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, really. Like, it's quite refreshing, especially with if Teddy Williams comes back, then we've got so much more kind of options at lock than we've probably been used to. But I think Rory Thornton's been really good this season. I think he's kind of your go-to line-out man, and it's definitely something to consider, say, against the Stormers, or if we were to play any South African teams in the future, of having a more line-out technician like him is probably brings more value. Especially, I think he's had a bit of a redemption arc this year. That he scored a few tries. I, for some reason, bet a tenner on him to score a try on Friday, and that came in. Didn't realise till long after the game, so that was a nice little celebration there. But like he seems a lot better around the park. Like he's a nuisance at ruck times. Like some of his clear outs are pretty good. It just seems like he's had a bit of resurgence, and it's great to see. But I think, yeah, with the line out as well, it's fantastic to see. Belcher didn't have his best game against the Scarlets at line out time, so it's fantastic to see that he kind of clearly worked on it. Might have been it was a sunny day, but yeah, you've got to make the most of any time a Cardiff team has a effective line out, because it's not very often, it feels. So yeah, it was pretty chuffed with that. But yeah, no, I will agree. Rory Thornton is the second coming of Luke Charteris.
I mean, to go from a 47% line out to a 92% line out in the space of 6 days is quite the turnaround. The only thing I'd add as well is how valuable it is threatening opposition ball as well, because he nicked one on our line, but constantly up making a mess of it. And I think that just gets in opposition's heads as well, that they think, okay, we've got to either go, safe ball at the front, or what's gonna happen. I think it just puts that little bit of doubt in the opposition as well, and I think he did that really well. Even when he wasn't winning ball, he was still getting up and causing a bit of a problem. So yeah, I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, he's obviously been coaching the line out of the Rags quite a bit this season, and I mean, I think I mentioned this before. Somebody did say that they thought he might retire at the end of the season, and then was shocked to learn that he was only 30.
That was me. I think the last time I was on, I couldn't believe he was only 30. But yeah, I mean, he's making a hell of a contribution to the club at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah.
Not only with his performances on the pitch, but joining in with coaching the Rags. For someone who, like, most of his career at Cardiff, you would say he's not a first choice player. This season, he's making a massive contribution to the club, isn't he?
You could definitely see him, if they manage him well, sort of straight transition into a line-out coach for us then when he does call time on his career in a couple of years. But yeah, if he's happy, I think the other valuable thing about him is I don't know if anyone's really happy to be like a squad player, but I think of somebody like Macaulay Cook for years, who he knew his role wasn't going to be week in, week out starter, but whenever he was called upon, he came in and really gave a solid performance in the engine room. And I think you're seeing that from somebody like Thornton as well, who, yeah, they're probably quite comfortable where they are. He's been here a few years now. He doesn't maybe have the sort of enthusiasm to move away and start again somewhere else. So if he's going to be comfortable as a squad player doing a bit of coaching, then that's great for us. And those are the sort of players that you rely on in the real dark nights of February and March when you're trying to claw wins out from somewhere. So no, good for him. Simon, another player who's had a bit of redemption arc in an element of their play, Callum Sheedy. He's second week in a row. He's gone 100% off the tee. We'll mention his new contract in a bit as well. I wondered, like, with the kick in now sort of seeming to be getting together a bit again for him, and I think his play around the park has been pretty good all season, but he's certainly becoming even more valuable at this late part of the season. Is a Wales recall on the horizon for him? There's a couple of injuries at fly half at the moment, so would you be against him going on summer tour?
I'd always be against Cardiff players going on a tour, going on a summer tour. But no, I think, I mean, you look at it, he's probably the form 10 at the moment, because it's not, I mean, his goal kicking again, has won us the game. There's games last season where we didn't hit those convert. They were a bit easier this week than I think last week's were. But even so, where we haven't hit those conversions, and it's kept the opposition in the game. We talked about it last week, and he, nailed everything that he needed to kick this week as well. He seems to be getting a little bit better at knowing when to go for the cross kick as well. I mean, I think they did a highlights package, didn't they, of after he signed his contract, and it was mostly cross kicks. So it's going to be scouted, but yeah, I mean, I think in terms of Wales, I think I said it before the Six Nations, they've got to pick somebody at 10 and just stick with it. Now, I wonder whether time isn't on Sheedy's side necessarily. I know he's not that old. He feels older than he is because he's been around for so long. But whether it's Edwards or whether it's Costello, I'd be kind of tempted where if that's the way it's going to go, you pick them for the summer. You've got to keep going with that. Obviously, he wasn't in the Six Nations squad, was he?
No,
in the end.
But there is a question mark. Costello's had ankle surgery, so I think he's got a question mark over summer involvement.
So I think it may well be that he gets picked in the squad, but I don't think Tandy will pick him to start necessarily. I don't think that's. I mean, it's a shame for him. He'll obviously want to win caps for Wales, but I think for Cardiff, I don't think it's a big blow. I think he's like Ben Thomas. He plays well for Cardiff, and that's all I really need him or want him to do. If I'm honest, I've been very, very biased in this podcast. I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
No, I think it's a fair point as well. Like we're playing quite a specific way, and that doesn't necessarily translate to test level. But I do wonder if he ends up getting quite a few minutes this summer. As mentioned, Costello ankle injury. Jared Evans picked up quite a bad looking shoulder injury weekend before last for Harlequins, and then. Yeah, I think Dan Edwards goes in as first choice this summer, but I mean, they are three tough games back to back, like Fiji, Argentina, South Africa are physically demanding, plus the travel in that as well. It wouldn't be a surprise if, or certainly they mixed it up for one of those games, but if the injury, there's going to be injuries in that run of three games, you're not going to escape unscathed from that. So if that was the case, then he'd certainly get some opportunity there, I think. Steve, another player to highlight who was the man of the match on the night, but I think he's somebody we've mentioned in passing on the podcast as playing well, but maybe haven't gone deep on Dan Thomas so much this season. I don't know, there's something of the Ollie Robinsons about him, maybe the way he moves around the field and the fact he came from Bristol. Also that he's just kind of under the radar, I think, outside of Cardiff, but he has been so good for us, isn't he? And seemingly getting better this season.
Yeah, I mean, he sums up a lot of the type of players we have at the moment. I think so. We got a few players who've been around a bit and are just tough and seem to just really like playing rugby. I think possibly his situation is thinking back to when he was a young player. I think he was most noted for being really quick. That's my recollection. He's fairly small for a back row forward, but a quick sort of handling type player. And I think it's probably fair to say he's lost a lot of that pace. But he's become like this kind of wily old dog, hasn't he? Who suits us perfectly. He's very much he fits in perfectly in this team. My favorite fact about him, I don't know if anyone else saw this at some point in the season. I'm sure I read it. I didn't dream it, but his his hobby when he isn't playing rugby and he isn't working on his farm is arm wrestling. He goes to arm wrestling clubs. He started off in Bristol, sort of. He's talking about, yeah, I needed a hobby, so I started arm wrestling with Russians in Bristol. That's what he does in his spare time. So yeah, he's the kind of crazy guy you need sometimes, isn't he?
I think when you look at the back rows, the fact that ours felt like ours came out on top, and that was a big back row that the Ospreys had, because they played Ratty at 6, didn't they, to start? That unit did really well, considering they were physically probably not as big. But I don't think we gave many penalties away on the floor at all. They were round the park, they were making their tackles, and he's at the heart of that. But look forward to the Netflix documentary about his arm wrestling career.
There's a film in that,
post rugby.
I just reading the quotes now. It says, when my wife was pregnant, she was back in Carmarthen and I was stuck in Bristol. So every night I was bored as hell and needed to find something to do. I was scrolling through Facebook and an arm wrestler came up on my phone and I thought I'd give this a go. So I searched arm wrestling clubs in Bristol and I was Ukrainian. It is a Ukrainian bloke called Sasha came up. He said every Monday or Tuesday night for an hour, come along. I turned up and it was literally 4 or 5 Ukrainian blokes in his garden shed. Yeah. I mean, he is a clean-off bloke, but fantastic rugby player, and I think there's certainly an argument to be made that sort of balance-wise, you have him and then one of both of them on man, perhaps at the moment, rather than both of them. Just the way he's doing all the hard yards, and I don't know, there may be something in it, but the amount of times he just pops up on a loose ball, particularly from like a kick or something, it's too uncanny to be a coincidence every time that he's in the right place. So it certainly adds a lot. Fordy, another player to mention is Jacob Beetham. We've talked about the aerial game, and he was a big part of that, but I thought it was interesting that Simon Thomas on Twitter mentioned from last week's press conference, Cornel van Zyl had stated they see him as a winger primarily now at this point, where he's played for the last few games. Is that something we can get on board with, as him being a winger full time?
There's definitely kind of a debate with when you've got Cam Winnett there of is he going to get minutes at 15? And I felt like he's progressively got better and better every time he's played on the wing. I think he was unlucky at certain times on Friday night that if the ball just bounces a little bit better, he could have got a try or two. But what I found quite interesting is with the kind of the new high ball rules with the no escorting. I think it was Bristol started a trend where like the wingers were kind of arcing round to essentially play the escorting role without getting caught out for escorting. And that's why you often see Beetham will catch the ball with his back to the defence because he's coming round, especially essentially escorting, but without escorting. And I think that's a way that a lot of teams are now doing it, of having possibly your taller player on the wing who's comfortable under the high ball, kind of coming round. And that's why you saw Beetham, he seems to be doing it a lot recently. And I do wonder if the new rules seem to disproportionately affect your shorter players, like someone like Winnett, like we've seen it with Blair Murray at Wales, whereas someone like Freddie Stewart at England, it's quite simple for him to tap the ball back when chasing a ball. So I can see certainly an argument for Beetham being more of a regular winger, especially if you still go by the Sherratt logic of one small winger and one big winger. I think with Beetham's height, it fits the bill a bit more of him as a big winger. I do feel a bit more comfortable with him on the wing than say outside centre. And I think if he's happy to play on the wing, which I did see an interview with him after the game on Friday, it says he's enjoying playing on the wing, then yeah, I'd be happy to see him as a wing option going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I think ever since I've been on this pod, we've had discussions about his position. There's been 12, 15. Obviously, Gatland randomly decided he was in the squad as a 10 briefly when he was involved in the Wales squad. And then he's obviously played at 13 a handful of times with this season. But I don't know if wing was ever really discussed. And here he is playing on the wing.
Can I just point out that back towards the end of last year, I suggested putting Beetham on the wing.
Right, well, there's our
So
attack
I'm
coach.
claiming full credit for this idea.
We're going to have to go back and listen to those pods now, just to verify this. Somebody out there, listen to the pod.
There's an AI dub over of Steve just going,
Yeah.
I think Beetham on the wing. No, it's an interesting point though, Fordy, about the aerial stuff. I hadn't really sort of thought about that. But yeah, he's sort of escorting himself back to the ball, really, I suppose, isn't he? That's what he's doing. And well, it's certainly working for us. I think I did see a stat, I haven't got it to hand now, but we've got one of the best kick retention stats in the URC this season, and we're the team that kicks the most in the league as well. So it certainly gives us something in terms of territory and broken field attacking options. But I do like how we're bringing Beetham into midfield a lot more as well. I think we were seeing it a bit with Grady as well when he was fit, and Beetham looks pretty comfortable going into contact and more often than not going through contact as well, which is a good thing for us. Right, looking ahead slightly, there was any more specifically from the Ospreys game? Any more points?
And we're going to mention the fact that we actually scored from a tap penalty.
Oh yeah, go
directly.
On.
I saw it. I didn't see it on the agenda, and I was kind of like, surely, if Tony had been on the pod, there would have been a discussion about the fact that Belcher finally got over. He seemed to be carried over by McNally at one point, but the tap penalty finally worked directly.
Yeah, I realised I had forgotten that to mention that. I think I'm still in shock that it actually took place. I feel like there's probably though when they were celebrating, there's somebody who was meant to be carrying that ball on the second phase and thought they were shooting for the try, is disappointed that Belcher made.
They're still out there. Right? They're still out there waiting for the ball to be pulled back.
Oh, it's good stuff. But yeah, we shall move on slightly to just sort of how the league is left after that. Obviously, we've got a week off now as European semi-finals happen this weekend. But the race for the top eight has become down to 9 teams really now, and it's incredibly close. So Stormers are top on 56, and you've got Glasgow 55, Lions 53, Leinster 53, Munster 51, Cardiff 50, Bulls 49, Ulster 47, and Connacht 44. For Cardiff, it's our best win total and points total since we had 10 wins and 54 points in 2018-19, which that was off 21 games as well, as we're only 16 games into this 18-game season. So a big tick in the box for progression-wise, where the last 2 seasons were 4 wins, 32 points, and then 8 wins, 47 points. So we're definitely making big strides in the right direction. In terms of getting into the playoffs, then, I think looking downwards, you're looking at Connacht, who are playing Munster in their next game. It's important to remember that URC, the first tiebreaker is games won, and then it goes to points difference. So if Connacht lose and only get 1 losing bonus point or none, then we'll definitely be in the playoffs, as they've only won 8 games, whereas we've won 10. But obviously, you could also look up the league as well and say that where we've got to play the top 2 and we're only 6 points off first at the moment. So anything is possible. I did ask on social media before the pod sort of how people thought Cardiff might approach these last 2 games, whether it's a case of turn up and try and score 4 points and get any losing bonus points that we can and keep increasing our points total, or whether we think we can actually turn up and beat Glasgow and Stormers in these games and push up as high as we can. Ben said, made the point that Glasgow aren't in great form at the moment and only have 1 more win than us, so why not? Lloyd said we've got players to come back, and with the rest week this week, we've also got a very good record against Stormers at home. And then Max on Facebook says he reckons we go for it. Realistically, we need 5. He thinks we need 5 more points to guarantee the playoffs, but not necessarily the case. But Glasgow are coming back from a poor South Africa tour and are going to be physically and mentally bruised. He also makes the point that Stormers may well have guaranteed a home quarter final by the time they play us in the last round of games, so may rotate against us, and that it's all to play for. Simon, what do you reckon? If you're Cornel van Zyl, what's your approach going into the last 2 games? Are you sort of saying we'll take 3 points here and there and have 2-3-0 wins, or are we just turning up and scoring as many tries as possible?
Yeah, I think having the week off, or that kind of a weekend off, works really well now with the number of injuries that we've had. It hopefully we'll have a few of those back. Then you've got tricky selection decisions to make. Going into that Glasgow game, I was looking that Glasgow have lost 4 games this season. 2 of them were the last 2 in South Africa, where nobody other than Connaught apparently win out there, and the other ones were one that was around the Six Nations that weekend that we played in the Six Nations in February, and the other one that I completely forgotten about when they were absolutely appalling and lost 23-0 to the Scarlets somehow. Yeah. And they were. I watched some of that game. I think the weather was terrible, but they were just clueless from everything that I saw. That just allowed the Scarlets to kind of walk away with it. So they don't lose a lot, and certainly don't lose outside of the time when they're like shorn of their internationals. So yeah, they're going to be hurting. I don't think they're going to want to finish the season. I think they've lost 3 in a row now, if you consider the European exit as well. I think they'll go strong. And I think we should try and match it. I think we should pick the strongest team we can up. If you want to, you get to this stage of the season, and if you're going to progress, you're going to have to play Glasgow away, that type of team away. Why not test ourselves? Why not go, actually, we're going to try and get something out of this game. We've gone up there previously in previous seasons and caused them a few problems at times. But they've come down to the Arms Park and blown us away as well. It can go, there never seems to be kind of a middling kind of result, really. So I think that we've really toughed out 2 good wins. We've now got a bit of a break. I'd like to see us go up there strong, not to kind of go, oh, we'll throw this one because we've got a home game at the end of the season. Interestingly, Ulster have got exactly the same fixtures as us, but at home. Both of them are at Ravenhill. So they play Stormers the weekend we play Glasgow. So if we can get something there on the Friday night and put, kind of lay a marker down, that really, other teams will start looking at us a bit differently in the playoff picture as well. So I don't think 2 games from the end of the season you go, oh, actually, we're going to step back here. I think you just go and pick the strongest team you can. There'll be a bit of mixing and matching, but I think we've got to go. I think if we try to play clever for score 4 tries or, within a point, we'll end up just being hammered and getting nowhere near it. So I think you might as well just go for it and go, well, carry on doing what you're doing. I think the Bulls and the Ospreys away are the only 2 sides that in the league that have really kind of blown us away. The Bulls was at altitude, and so I think it's a good test to see where we're going to be, because you don't just want to qualify for the playoffs. Okay, that's the target this season, but then you want to get beyond the first game. And this type of game, you could say it's not a knockout game, but it could feel like that. Do the job here. It's easier against the Stormers. Pick something up. That kind of mentality of, come on, this is the side you've got to knock off its perch. Particularly, they did Leinster up there, didn't they? Completely a couple of weeks ago. So it's a really tough game, but go for it.
Bordy, agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think you've got to go for it against Glasgow. I think it's a real shame that they're not still in Europe, because they looked pretty battered at the end of that Toulon game, which they obviously lost, and then 2 weeks in South Africa where they got pretty comfortably beaten, and then they'd have Leinster away in a semi, which they got 50 put on them in the quarters last year in Europe away to Leinster. So you think for morale, that would be quite brilliant to play a Glasgow team who would just be absolutely battered and bruised. But I think just from the point of view of momentum, we've presumably got a bit more momentum going than they have at the moment with their 2 losses in South Africa. And yeah, like Simon touched upon, we played them away the year they won the league, and it was quite a close game. I remember Ellis Bevan kicked it out at the end for God knows what reason, and we still could have won it, I think. So yeah, hopefully we can give them a good go, and it would just be nice to kind of have that reassurance then going against the Stormers that it's locked in. And then, yeah, against the Stormers, I think even if it's locked in at that point, I think that's also a game you've got to go for because you're at the Arms Park. We've only lost one game at home this season against the Scarlets, and that was a game we really should have won. So, yeah, I think we've really got to go for it in both games. But yeah, silver lining would certainly be picking up a couple of points against Glasgow, even in defeat.
Steve, any strong thoughts?
I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it? Because start of the season, I thought, well, if we get to 50 points, we'll definitely be in the top eight. Because if you go by the past seasons, that 50 points does get you there. And a few weeks back, I remember thinking, well, if we beat Scars and Ospreys, we'll definitely be in there. I mean, you got to say fair play to Cardiff for winning at the Stormers because that's a hell of a result for them. And without that, we would already be in the top eight, I think. But yeah, I mean, we've got to treat each game like a cup final, don't we? That's the way you keep the momentum that will help us get the 4 or 5 points we need. So yeah, we've got to go after Glasgow.
Yeah, I do hope that whether it's through us beating Glasgow or whether it's through kind of not getting anything against Munster, that we are secure in the playoffs ahead of that last game. Because I think if we can go into that Stormers home without that pressure of like worrying that we might drop out of the top eight, hopefully you get a big crowd for what would likely be the last home game of the season, unless we do string 2 big wins together and get a home quarter final. But yeah, if we can get a good crowd for that, hopefully decent weather on that Friday night, that could be a really great occasion to watch a Cardiff team with nothing to hold them back go and have a real dig at this Stormers side that, yeah, they're not in great form at the moment. There's a bit of chat about some of their players as well, some of their big name players who perhaps aren't functioning at the highest level at the moment. And that's why the top 8 race has become so interesting because it's not just been about the sort of 5, 6 teams around that 8th mark. It is a genuine thing that those 2 teams like Munster, Stormers and Glasgow at the top, who seemed like they were miles away coming out of the Six Nations, have slowly come back into the pack as well. So, yeah, for all the digs that we give URC, and there's plenty of rightful of digs to make at them. It is quite an exciting end to this season, and anything can happen. So, be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, we'll obviously pick up looking ahead to those games as they come with the weekend off this week.
Also, hopefully the Scarlets can do us a favour and we can lift the Welsh Shield at the Arms Park.
That is true.
Happened.
Will the Scarlets do us a favour? I mean, let me just think on that for a moment. I mean, I feel like they could have actually done us a favour on Saturday and they chose not to. I don't think they lost that like accidentally to the Bulls. I'm putting Tony's hat on and saying they purposely lost that game so that we didn't get a favour from them. But yeah, that would be good to lift that trophy as well because it is a bit of a joke, but as the whole hubcap thing. But it is nice to finish as the top Welsh side, I think, at the end of every season and just ramp up that Cardiff hatred a little bit more from everybody else.
We'll have to get the sandwich crumbs off it if anyone else is using it. That's what it's been used for.
Right, moving on to a bit of news then. As I mentioned, we've had the news of Callum Sheedy signing a new contract this week. 30-year-old who's been back at the club 2 years now. No mention of long-term in this contract announcement, so maybe just a 1-year deal at this stage for him. But I think generally consensus is pretty good to keep hold of him. And then by the time you're listening to this pod on Wednesday, Jacob Beetham will have been announced as a new contract as well on Tuesday evening. We haven't seen the wording of that yet, but hopefully that one's a long-term deal and we're keeping him round for the next couple of years because, as we discussed earlier, he is becoming a very important player, whether it's on the wing or in any position really for us this season, as he's had a good run of fitness. Talking of fitness then, a bit of an injury update. So obviously a lot of players been missing over the last 2 weeks, though we've had some makeshift players both in the starting 15 and that bench on Friday was a bit all over the shop. But it looks like good news. The hope is that certainly James Botham, Stefan Manuel, Josh Adams and Alex Mann will be fit to play Glasgow. Mann, who dropped out late on Friday after a knock picked up against the Scarlets, but he was very close to playing on Friday, so you hope he'll be back in 2 weeks. And then Teddy Williams has been targeting that Glasgow game for his long-awaited return after his nasty foot injury earlier in the season. But I think just if we can get any minutes out of him towards the back end of the season would be great. And Harry Millard's slightly less known with, I think it was hamstring or a calf injury that he'd picked up, but it was just a few weeks was the wording when it happened. It was probably about 2 weeks ago now. So fingers crossed that we can get him back as well for those final two games of the season. Rags Corner then. Cardiff were in Super Rugby Cymru quarter-final action on Saturday at the Arms Park. They beat Carmarthen 50-33. 2 tries for Harry Wild, 2 tries for Elijah Evans, Ethan Lloyd, Derry Cross, and Lucas de la Rua also getting over the line. 12 points off the boot for Wild for a 22-point haul for him on the afternoon. 3 late on for Lloyd Lucas as well. That Elijah Evans' second try. I don't know if anyone's seen the YouTube highlights, but the finish for that is excellent. It steps about 3 blokes in a phone box and then scores in the corner. And there was some really Oshan Darwin Lewis didn't get on the score sheet, but some really nice link play for him. His upward curve since being involved with Wales under-20s has been quite noticeable, I think, this season, and he's finishing the season very strongly there, to the point where Elijah Evans is having to play on the wing so that Darwin Lewis can continue in the 13 jersey. So exciting to see that. That means Cardiff are into the semi-final now against Llandovery. This on Saturday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. kickoff. Another all-pay game with early bird prices until Thursday evening at 5 o'clock on the Cardiff Rugby website. I think it's going to be on S4C's online channels on Saturday afternoon. But I mean, if it's not, don't come crying to me about it. I just don't care. So do feel free to get down and support the boys, though, if you can. I think maybe we see Steph Emmanuel and Tom Bowen pop up for the Rags this weekend as well to bolster them, which would be huge to get them back involved. Steve. Oh, sorry.
No. I was just thinking myself that picking Tombo in for a SRC game feels like cheating, but no, bring it on.
Well, I'm all for a bit of cheating for us. No, but a good game though. They're always good games against Llandovery on Saturday, so get down for that one if you can. At this point of the pod, then, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to the Rap channel as well as the sister channel, the Global Gain Line, where there's pods coming out across all sorts of teams and competitions all the time. Right, we'll finish then the final part of the podcast with finally some off-field chat. I've been putting it off all season as it's just been sort of rumours and little bits and pieces of news that haven't really amounted to too much. But finally, last Wednesday, the WRU produced a statement in which they announced that the Welsh Rugby Union and Y11 Sport and Media, who are the Ospreys owners, of course, have jointly agreed that Y11 withdraw from the bid process for the proposed purchase of Cardiff Rugby due to constructive discussions, with Ospreys expected to sign the 2025 professional rugby agreement shortly. For Cardiff, they say that the move means Cardiff Rugby will remain under WRU ownership for now and until it makes commercial and strategic sense to revisit this decision. Abby Tierney was quoted as saying, Y11 presented the best bid for Cardiff Rugby, but the WRU has ultimately concluded that it is in the best interests of Welsh Rugby for Cardiff Rugby to remain under WRU ownership for now. They go on to say that they are still aiming to move to 3 professional sides at some point, but that now won't be until at least until the end of the 2027-28 campaign. So Cardiff staying under WRU for now. Steve, I'll come to you first because I know you've been waging war against Y11 over the last few months. I guess my question then on that front to you is the news more pleasing to have avoided Y11 or more disappointed / annoyed to be staying under the WRU for at least sort of 2 years, it seems?
It's difficult to not think of Y11 and the WRU as cheeks of the same arse. But I think on balance, it's better for Y11, at least for the moment, to have been seen off. Purely because for me, I think the implications of that sort of deal could end up kind of chasing the club around and really harming our image, particularly if it led to the demise of the Ospreys, because I think that notion of surviving at the expense of another club's, like for me, it's just wrong. So I'm glad that threat's not there. But there are so many questions left from what the WRU have said. And I think, first of all, they're important for everyone in Welsh Rugby, because if the WRU is saying that for the duration, for how many seasons they're going to act as, they're going to play the benefactor over Cardiff, well, that's I mean, I forget, PRA 25 requires the owners to put in an additional, is it 1.5 million a year? So, like, let's say they hold us onto us for 3 years. That's another £4.5 million of Welsh Rugby Union money going into Cardiff. I think everyone in Welsh Rugby, from club secretaries and supporters on it, should ask, well, like, why? What's the purpose for that? Because there are, like, regardless of what you think of Martin Ryan and his consortium, they are saying, well, we'll do that. We'll take that. We'll take that burden for you. So, what is the argument for the WRU seeing benefit in holding on to Cardiff? What's the reason? And also, I mean, also just for us as Cardiff rugby fans, if we were sitting here and Y11 had taken over, or Martin Ryan's guys had taken over, we would quite reasonably be saying, okay, so what's your vision for the club? What are you going to do? What's the plan? And I think that just because it's the WRU, I think that still holds, and we need to ask, okay, what are your plans for the club then? Are you just going to keep us taking over for, you can sell us on at a later date? Or, what are you going to do? And we need to ask those questions as well.
Simon, I think sort of the big question for Cardiff fans immediately was, well, why not just sell us to the Hollywood Consortium? They're obviously quite vague in what they're saying, despite the tweet accompanying the WRU statement professing to provide clarity for Cardiff and Ospreys on the situation. I'm not sure there was much clarity for Cardiff. I mean, would anyone be against the Hollywood Consortium coming in and accept the WRU?
Yeah, I mean, reading the statement, it all seems very amicable that they've come to an agreement that they won't sell to Y11, which is kind of like, well, why have we gone through all this pain?
Yeah.
For you then to go, oh no, actually, strategically, we've come to the agreement that we won't, and thanks Y11 for, coming along for the ride. It just suggests that the whole concept wasn't about who's best to run Cardiff. It was how you get down to 3 sides. I'm reading between reading between big lines there. But if it was about, actually, we need to get Cardiff off the books, you would go, okay, Y11, you're stepping away. We have another bidder. Would you like to come back to the table? Okay, let's negotiate with you, see what we can do. And if, as Martin Ryan indicated, that their bidders, they tightened it up, listened to the feedback, and amended the bid, there's no reason not to. So the only, and this is all like conspiracy, isn't it? It's all if, buts, and maybes. It leaves you thinking, well, the reason it isn't about selling Cardiff, because they can do that. It's about retaining the asset as some form of bargaining tool, or until they get to the point where there is a clear route to 3 clubs. And then, as we always thought all along, Cardiff will be used as the key chip in play in order to deliver that, and that's what they've done. I think, fair play to Steve, the trust, all the fans. They've made it quite clear we don't want Y11. I think that has played a role in them coming to this decision, because it's not a financial decision. It's not. Somewhere along the line, the WRU or Y11 have got cold feet and gone, no, we're not going to do this. There's too much heat on it now. Ospreys fans and Cardiff fans and everybody else that's kicked up a fuss about it. That feels like the reason. I don't think it's a financial reason. And then you've got, the kind of weasel words of until it's, was it commercially appropriate, or whatever the phrase is. And you're like, when's that? It's not like you've got loads of money. You've just turned around and gone, yeah, we financially underperformed in the Six Nations in terms of seat sales. They've got a couple of big concerts this summer. I think they have.
Not as many as previous years, though. I think it's only 2 or 3 this summer, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's not like they're suddenly like, oh, we can, the financial outlook looks better. We can keep this for a couple of years and sit on it and build it as an asset. As Steve said, give me the choice between WRU or Y11. I would pick WRU. Don't trust them. Don't want to be owned by them. Want to be back in private ownership. But they are a lot better. They're I have the limited, very, very small, limited confidence I have. I feel more confident in the ownership of the WRU than Y11, because as Steve said, I don't think it's just a slippery slope in terms of, you know, putting the Ospreys out of business. I don't think Y11 have covered themselves in glory with how they have financially supported the development of rugby in that area at all. And you look where the Ospreys have come from. You know, now they're losing to Cardiff. You know how the mighty have fallen. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time. It doesn't give us that certainty, and I think it feels like a game being played. And you know that the comments of kicking the can down the road to 2028. I think the other key point is the Scarlets and the Ospreys suddenly signing the PRA 25. Oh, not PRA 25. Yeah, it's PRA 25. Yeah. That changes the game. Obviously, there's been discussions going on behind the scenes. They're suddenly going to sign it. You know, things have changed, but if they had signed it, although, and I understand why they didn't, you know, all those many months ago, would we have saved some of this pain or not? I don't know, but it just feels like it always does, a mess, and all we can do is just try and keep going, winning games, keeping the best Welsh talent. What I would say is, you know, coming back to the point about the rags as well, that system really seems to be working. You know, players are stepping up into the Cardiff side, ready to play. And we're seeing, you know, they're going to be in the future stepping up as combinations as well, not just kind of a 12 coming up, but a 10 and a 12, or a 10, 12 and 13 that have played together, 4 and a 5. You know, so I think we've done, it feels like we've got the pathway, that element of the pathway right. And I'm not saying, you know, there isn't work to be done or things like that. So yeah, satisfying that we saw off that bid, but a lot of uncertainty.
Bordy, obviously a lot of the commentary is against the WRU executive. We know that Richard Collier-Keywood's stepping down in the summer, but obviously Abby Tierney is front and centre with a lot of it. Dave Reddin as well, a name continues to be attached to a lot of this. I think you could follow it through where they've sort of gone from 4 teams to 2 teams to 3 teams to selling Cardiff to now not selling Cardiff, and now it's 4 teams again for another 2 years. Is it at the point where their credibility and trust is at such a low point that it's time for them to move on, that nothing can really go forward with them there? Or do we have to, you know, would change in the executive set us back in timeline? So do we just have to suck it up with who we've got at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a difficult one. Excuse me. It's a difficult one to balance. I think of the current executive, I know, of course, they're bound to all sorts of kind of confidentiality and they can't kind of reveal too much in public interviews, but it's just anytime I hear an interview with Abby Tierney, it's kind of very deeply uninspiring, I find. Particularly the kind of the one after the EGM, and I understand she can't talk too much for the almost basically no comment to everything. I think she was asked if a chair came in who supported 4 teams in the future, would everything then change then? And she kind of just said, "Oh, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it." And I think that's kind of, I think it was Alex Bywater who asked that, and I think it's quite a kind of crucial question of what direction the WRU going in. And I think you've summed it up of kind of the change in, you know, 2 teams, 3 teams, now currently 4 teams, that say in theory the WRU targeting, a lot of conspiracy theorists believe an Anglo-Welsh League could be on the horizon. What's to say if they come out and say Anglo-Welsh League is on the agenda, they could then in 6 months say, "Oh no, we've changed course, with join a league in South America or something." Like it's difficult to have the kind of trust there. And yeah, that's not even kind of getting into the mess and the various crises the WRU seem to find themselves in pretty consistently compared to, you know, I know there's no such thing as kind of a perfect union. Various unions have their issues, but I think if we're still to consider Wales as a tier 1 nation, I don't think there's a tier 1 nation whose union is in as much limbo as Wales is, and it's kind of very difficult there to then trust. And yeah, obviously I'm very much glad kind of Y11 hasn't gone through, but I think there's still a lot of questions to be asked, and kind of what I'm referring to with how uninspiring the executive can be is where's there that ability to then scrutinize the executive as fans? Like, how practical is that going to be? And how practical will that be then for the future of Cardiff Rugby, really?
I think trust is earned, and it's built on having a relationship that is honest and transparent and truthful. And even when you've got to say the hard things, they're said in a way that's constructive and is looking to continue to kind of hold a relationship and build that. I don't think the WRU over many, a number of decades have built that level of trust with those of us that are supporting the professional rugby team. I think that's across the board. From the moment of, well, not from the moment of, but remembering Nigel Walker's holding their feet to the fire type comment. It's always been a command and control. We're not negotiating with you. We're telling you what to do, and it's in our interests that we are going to act. So there can be no trust because there has been no effective dialogue that's been based in probably, maybe under what's his name, Martin Phillips? Was it Martin?
Yeah, he was the former the former CEO. So.
Yeah, it felt like there was a bit of a thaw during that period, and everybody was broadly on the same page, but not since then. And if you haven't got that, those in executive positions, if can develop those relationships, it's going to be harder because there is a level of mistrust, but they can do that. Build in that goodwill, make concessions, think about what they're doing, listen and act. So it's not, it's not impossible to do. It's just very hard because it's the kind of culture of the organisation to just seemingly it's that plan, and regardless of what anybody else says, it's that plan, and we know best, and you're just there to make the best, make the top of the tier as effective as possible, rather than thinking about that kind of how the whole thing. And there are good elements, I'm sure, of that plan that they have, but without trust, how are you going to implement it? I can't see how they can implement it by driving everyone away, which creates a different problem for them down the road.
I think what's frustrating me particularly, and I've cut this WRU executive quite a lot of slack, because they picked up a mess. There's no question about that. What they inherited was absolutely just all over the shop from Steve Phillips and from Nigel Walker. But I thought that the consultation has taken a lot of criticism, but it broadly followed what sort of consultations I've been involved in my professional life, where you do have, they present one sort of scenario, and then you consult based on that rather than just a broad consultation, and they changed it at the end, and I was sort of on board with that. But what's really fatiguing me is the number of decisions they've made. Apparently, we've made a decision to sell Cardiff Rugby. We've made a decision to go to 3 teams. And then nothing actually happens. So, like Simon's right, that they're sticking with this plan to get to 3 teams, and they're not deviating from that. But then they're not really doing anything about that in the meantime either. So we just continue in this never-ending limbo of what's going to happen for the next season, what's going to happen for the next 2 years, what happens after 2028, and there's no. I think at this point, I generally think they don't know. I'm not entirely sure they have a plan, and that's the difficult thing, is that that's when rumor jumps in the way and conspiracy theories fills the void of that's left. But yeah, I've cut them a lot of slack. I'm just with Abby and with Richard Collier-Keywood, you just kind of think, yeah, you might have this vision of what you want to get to, but at this point, I don't believe that they have the ability to get us anywhere near that. Whether it's right or wrong is sort of a side point to that. Even if it could be 100% right, 100% wrong, I don't think they can get us there. They haven't displayed any evidence that they can follow through on the decisions that their board has made or that they've made in the executive and actually implement them. And what that's led to now is, obviously, there was never a massive amount of trust there now, but I just think their credibility is really at an all-time low as well, because whether they are strictly U-turns or not, I think in the press and on social media, they've very much been painted as U-turns, and you've seen particularly some of the politicians down towards Swansea Way who were campaigning against the Ospreys being closed have declared victory and turned headlines into, the Ospreys will survive until the 2030s. That's probably not even true. Well, it's almost certainly not true. There is no definitive way that the Ospreys will definitely get to 2030s with this 2028 break clause. But again, that's the void that the WRU have created without any plan, and that's what can go in there. Sorry, Steve, you were going to say.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, you said a lot of it anyway, but on Fordy's point about the conspiracy theorizing, I mean, I can think of several things that the WRU might be referring to when they talk about it making selling Cardiff when it makes commercial and strategic sense. Could be an Anglo-Welsh league. It could be where an arms park redevelopment happens. It could be after they go to three sides. There's various possibilities. It could also be that they don't really know either. But that sort of conspiracy theorizing is going to happen in a void, in an information void. And to an extent, I could understand that whilst the Y11 deal was being discussed, because then you'd be asking the WRU to go into detail about a commercial transaction which is still taking place. But that's not the case anymore. And we just have a situation from a Cardiff perspective where we, in a sense, have new owners or a new ownership situation. And as fans, I think we need a bit more detail. I think we need more than when it makes your club is an asset and we might sell it in future where it makes commercial and strategic sense to do so. I think we need a bit more than that.
I put out on socials the other part of the question pre-pod was just a general question of what people think the WRU are sort of up to, basically, which is sort of a standing question really every week of what you think they're up to, but particularly with Cardiff now and yeah, the sort of range of answers. Gareth said they want control, they foresaw it, minus some financial risk with Y11. They don't believe the Hollywood bid will allow them to retain that control. Liam thinks that they're waiting for 3 teams to be WRU owned eventually, and that's their end goal with it. Peter says they probably the Y11 didn't like the WRU control either, and he thinks maybe they've pulled out of the deal because of that. And so it'll go to tender, and then the WRU will take control and possibly cut 1 or 2. There's a lot of people who think that the end game is 2 WRU owned teams eventually. Matthew says they want to control the clubs, and they're using Cardiff as the start to be Leinster-esque. DCB says, I feel they want to relocate us next door to the Millennium Stadium and push the Athletic Club into some sort of decision regarding the South Stand. And then Jeff says, there's probably something behind the scenes going on, and hopefully it's an Anglo-Welsh league. I guess, Simon, I stuck my colours to the mast in a blog on the weekend where I stated that I'd sell a family member to be involved in an Anglo-Welsh league. I am taking bids from family members which one's going to be sold. But I guess long term, obviously we're with the WRU now as a kind of lesser of two evils with Y11. Is there a world where long term you'd accept like full-time WRU ownership, but we were in an Anglo-Welsh league?
I don't think I'd ever accept full-term. I've said before, I'm going to be cynical about anybody after what happened with Halford Capital that comes in and buys the club. Even if Martin Ryan and I was going to say, and his consortium. I was going to say the Hollywood lads,
call them their full band name.
I still can't get that phrase. Doesn't make sense. But even if they came in, they still signed up to the same deal, which is total WRU control of the rugby side. They're just running the stadium and putting some money in. Now, do I think that Martin Ryan has more interest in Cardiff as a club than Y11? Yes, absolutely. But owners are going to have to prove to me, certainly, that they have the best interest of the club, whoever they are, whether it's the WRU or whether it's Martin Ryan or whether it's Y11. And that's, my position on it. It's well established that a lot of us, Cardiff supporters in particular, see an Anglo-Welsh league as the way forward in terms of being most financially attractive to driving the business. You only have to look at, Friday night, a game against the Ospreys, sold out, but lots of people were there. As I said, I had a stag do from Northampton in front of me who were sometimes Northampton. I mean, they talked all the way through it. Sorry if the Northampton boys are listening to this, but I think it's unlikely. But they were there as, oh, this is a big night. So we got tickets to come along. So, I think it creates something. It's preferable. It's the rivalry is closer. If financially, it just makes more sense. So from that perspective, yeah, absolutely. It's still going to be whatever happens, even if we're in private ownership, it's still going to be the WRU's decision. And they seem to have missed opportunities time and time again to make that decision. And as you said, Dan, the strategic direction of 3 teams, but there's no coherent strategy for getting there because there just isn't. The fact is that I don't know whether it's Collier Keywood or Dave Reddin kind of openly admitted there'd been no real discussion at one point with the URC about how that would happen. And I think the URC turned around and went, no, you've got 4 teams, you have to go and find another one. It just shows the strategic thinking is kind of like, oh, we'll announce this. How are you going to do it? Oh, yeah, we'll work that out. And then all the problems that we all see that are quite obvious of you are, tied into 4 teams, and they're not just going to let you, oh, right, yeah, no, of course they won't. So I still don't have a massive amount of confidence that the WRU could negotiate the deal for the Anglo-Welsh, but a deal that is good as well. I don't think it's just about let's get teams in whatever. It has to be a reasonable, we don't want to be financially, we're not going to get the best possible deal, but it's got to be a decent deal as well. So the confidence in their commercial acumen, I'm not, I don't have massive confidence in that either. Maybe we could sell them a zip line. I don't know.
Fordy, I guess.
Sorry, yeah. I mean,
Steve.
just to pick up on something Simon said, on the Health of Capital, Neil Griffith and Philip Camp, I think that experience that we all enjoyed a year ago, I think that should make us probably more than any club aware of the fact that we need to really, obviously we want this to be fun and be able to go to games. But we do also have to keep an eye on our owners and what their plans are. And that would be absolutely true if Martin Ryan's guys had taken over. That would be true if Y11 had taken over. That would be true if another had taken over. And it's true now. We have to know what the long-term plan is for the club, and it would be reassuring to know that there is one. And as you say, Dan, I'm not convinced that the WRU have a long-term plan.
Fordy, that leads me on to, is the next step now, I mean, do we need the Cardiff to come out? Obviously, they didn't make a statement at the time. I think only the Scarlets made a statement after the WRU news came out last week. But I recall Scott Waddington coming in as interim or independent chair, whatever it was, back in October, saying, I'm looking forward to meeting the fans. And I don't think we've heard from him since. It's about 6-7 months later now. Is it now the time for them to get up in front of supporters and answer a few questions?
Yeah, very much so. But again, in terms of the scrutiny, I think there's so many questions that need to be asked that you see with the union executive how little kind of transparency there is there, that you just suspect something like that isn't going to happen. I think it needs to happen, but I fear something like that's not really going to happen at this current position, because there's just, quite frankly, so much, as we've all been discussing, of in terms of the long-term future and even just the short-term future. One thing I just want to touch on is, with all this mess, I think, especially this kind of at this point in the season, it's done very little to attract any sponsors, I imagine, particularly from, if you're looking at the Ospreys, they must be scrambling around for any sponsors for next season, because who was going to kind of sponsor a team that they weren't 100% sure were going to exist next season? And that's one thing that always kind of worries me, of, the whole cutting teams is kind of cost-cutting measures, but the uncertainty in the meantime means that potential revenue isn't there, because it can't be. And I think it's such a mess, quite frankly.
Steve, with your trust hat on, is that something the trust will be pushing for now to get some
Absolutely.
Q&A going?
Yeah, I mean that's something the trust is definitely going to be pushing for. Q&A with the supporters and as much communication with the WRU as possible to get an eye on what's happening next. Kind of slightly tangential point, but if you look at the setup of the club at the moment, the leadership structure it feels piecemeal. I mean, the Cardiff Rugby Board at the moment is four individuals. Two of them are WRU employees. I think we need to be pushing for a fully reconstituted independent Cardiff Rugby Board. I think if you're going to have a long-term plan for the club, that's essential, particularly if you do eventually want to sell it back into private ownership. Things like that need to be talked about, and the point needs to be made, and that communication needs to be there. And at this point, I don't see why the WRU need to be cagey about stuff like that anymore if they're going to be owning us long term.
I think, Steve, they could not well, I'm going to say reset, but they do have an opportunity to reset the relationship. New chair coming in, I'm really conscious that at the end of the day, those in the executive positions, as you said, Dan, had an awful hand to play. Probably haven't covered themselves in glory the way they had, but they are human as well. And I think some of the stuff on social and how personal it gets isn't acceptable. This is about as much about the culture of that organization. Cy Williams's book is really, it really shows that for decades. This is how the union has run. This is how the union has run the game in Wales. It is culturally within the mix, and it needs to change. And sometimes you need kind of interim leadership, or leadership that starts a bit of a change and a bit of a nudge in the right direction and takes some of the brickbats for it, for somebody to then come in and really do the job properly. And I have no doubt that the job that the executive are doing is incredibly hard, incredibly stressful. They're dealing with huge financial figures as well, and trying to keep the game in and of itself afloat and alive. And I think we do need to remember that when we're having these conversations, because they are heated. They do mean a lot to those of us that go week in, week out, and have invested a lot in the identities in the club. But I think there is an opportunity for the union to reset. As I've been quite clear, I don't necessarily trust them, but there is that opportunity with a new chair to come in to go, look, we need to do this completely differently. We've bought ourselves 2 years. Some would say kick the can down the road, but maybe they bought themselves time to really do this differently and to really engage and to come out and have the conversation with Cardiff fans, to go, look, this is where we're at. This is what the figures look like. This is what we're trying to achieve. And this is what, over the next 2 years, we commit to you. If we do not sell you, this is what we want to do. And this is our strategy for you. They have that opportunity now. I'd welcome that. I'd welcome that conversation. We might not agree on it, but we can do that respectfully and have a bit of distance. And as you say, Steve, the trust is going to be central to that. The kind of us and them, coming from them, saying that, but has got to stop, because it's just not working. It's driven such a wedge between clubs as well, between supporter bases, as well as between the union and the professional game, that we're all going to sink into this. But I think remembering that people make mistakes, they're human at the end of the day, but there is an opportunity to kind of reset what that looks like. I hope they take it. Do I feel confident that they will? Not necessarily, but it's easy to kind of throw rotten tomatoes from the sidelines. People in those positions are dealing with incredibly difficult situations. People might now throw rotten tomatoes at me because I'm not being an apologist for the union or how they've gone about things, but I think we just need to remember that.
The only thing I'd say is I get nervous when the WRU start talking project resets. That takes
You're quite
me back.
Right. We'll come up with something else. Don't worry. We'll workshop the name. We'll consult and we'll workshop the name.
No, but I agree with the point generally about getting supporters on board, because I think we've shown as Cardiff supporters that if you get us involved early, I think that summer of 2023 is a great example of that the club was in a really tough spot, but they came out and were open and honest and got us on board. And look what we've achieved now in the last 3 years. I think if the WRU, as much as they're starting from quite a tough spot in terms of getting our trust back, but if they come straight out and are open and honest about what they want to achieve with us and get supporters on board, it can change quite quickly for them. I think if they're like genuinely trying to get us into a good spot, whether that eventually leads back to private ownership or whatever it does lead to. But it's certainly going to be a lot easier for them to achieve whatever they're doing with supporters understanding where we're going and getting on board than it is if we're left in the dark and creating our own conspiracy theories every week. So, any more on that? All good? No, good. I think I've been a pent up 6 months of not being able to talk about it, and we've managed to release quite a lot of it there. I think just to say for us on the pod as well, I know the guys at the club are obviously they're not WRU people. They are people who were at Cardiff Rugby before all this happened, and they'll no doubt be keen to start getting comms out there as well. I think we've got quite a good relationship on them in the pod, and I will ask if we can see if we can get some senior people on the pod as the season draws to a close and the summer starts, as a good way of them reaching out as well to supporters as a whole. So hopefully that does happen. But until then, we'll be back next week on pod. We'll have a bit of a Rags deep dive after their game and hopefully a final to look forward to. And we'll preview that game against Glasgow as well. But until then, Fordy, thank you very much for joining me.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers, Simon.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers, Steve.
Pleasure as always.
And thank you for listening, and we will catch you next week.